Alright, I'm Karl Scotland. I'm a coach with Rally Software. I've been doing Kanban since around 2007 when I first bumped into David. So I think as Mike mentioned this morning, I was involved in setting up Limited Whip Society. I have to say I thought it was a bit of a cheesy name, but I was overruled, and I think quite rightly so. Kind of the idea was not to turn it into a kind of big formal group. This is a new talk today, and it's kind of where my head is at, the sort of things I'm thinking around at the moment. And Stephen Parry was supposed to be here giving a talk at the end of the day. I'm going to be channeling him a little bit. I was actually lucky enough, I went and went to one of his masterclasses on Thursday, and I was sitting there thinking, this is great, this ties in exactly with what I'm going to talk about on Saturday, and it's kind of changed it all as well. Fortunately, I'm not using slides, so not too much change. I want to start off with a little exercise. So I'm going to ask maybe the people at the front, can you just kind of come up and stand by the screen here, on the front row? And then the people that are standing at the back, I want you to kind of form a little group as well. I'm going to show you a picture. Picture of a famous person, someone that I'm guaranteed you're going to recognise. So I'm going to ask the people at the front to just have a quick discussion, make sure you all agree who you're going to see when I show this picture. The people at the back, have a little discussion, make sure you all agree who this person is when I show it to you. And then for the people sitting down, just kind of don't talk to each other, just decide in your own head who you think it is. Alright, so you might want to just cluster up the screen a bit, not right in front of it so that people at the back. Alright, so I want you to decide, and I'll go really close to make sure you say who you think it is, people at the back. You have agreement on who you think it is? Okay. Alright, so at the back, who did you see? Marilyn Monroe. Who did you see?
Albert Einstein.
You saw Albert Einstein. Okay, we're both looking at the same picture. What about who do you see here?
Both.
Okay, so the people in the middle kind of saw a bit of both. Alright, thank you. You can sit down. Oh, thanks, Mike. We get live tweeting in this as well and things like that. I could turn the Wi-Fi off. So, who's familiar with the Kanban method? First principle of the Kanban method? Alright, start with what you've got now. So the people at the front, you're going to be starting with Albert Einstein. And the people at the back, you're going to be starting with Marilyn Monroe. So if we're going to start with where we are now, we really need to make sure we know where we are now. Because if we all think we're in different places, we're just going to be doing random change probably. So this is kind of trying to some ideas that I'm finding useful, I'm thinking about, and helping teams. When I'm saying start where you are now, how do we know where we are now? So the other kind of thing, the people at the front are normally the developers. They kind of see this pretty ugly thing. People at the back, they're normally the kind of executives, this beautiful thing. People at the middle managers who are trying to translate, because they can see a bit of both. Yeah, that's that, but I've got to tell them I can't tell them their baby's ugly. Right, so the first model, this is a model we used at Rally. And it's actually a model around organisational change, understanding organisational change, because that's really what we're trying to do with Kanban. We're trying to understand organisational change. And there's 5 bits to this. This is called the Galbraith star model. Let's see if this is going to work. Fortunately, I forgot my pen, and then I realised that the pens they've given out for free have got these nice things on them as well. So we have strategy. What's our organisational strategy? We need to make sure that we're designing Kanban systems that meet our organisational strategy. Oop. What's our organisational structure? What are our processes? What are our rewards? And then what are our policies around people? And these things are all connected. Every one of them is connected to the other one. So it's called the star model, because you kind of get this star in the middle. Now when Galbraith was doing this for organisational change, he's kind of focusing on the structure, because what he's saying is, too often when we're designing organisations, we focus on the structure and we forget about everything else. I think this is relevant for us in Kanban. So I think we often focus on the process and forget about everything else. So we need to make sure that we understand the strategy. What's our organisational strategy? Because we need to make sure we have an alignment to that. As at the start finishing conference in Stockholm, kind of alignment was a key thing there. What's our organisational structure? That's kind of the roles. We talk about kind of respecting current roles. What are those roles? Make sure we understand where the power is in the organisation, what the decision-making structures are. And then we have our processes. That's kind of where the value stream mapping comes in. How does the information flow? You know, where this knowledge discovery process, how does that flow through? Rewards, this is kind of the measurement aspect of it. How are we measuring our Kanban systems? Because if the measures we have are not in alignment in our strategy, we're going to get messy things. And then making sure we understand what our people are. What skills do we have? Because we have very kind of specialised skills, and we design a system for a cross-functional, multi-skill team, where it's not going to work. So we need to be thinking about all of these things and getting all of these things in alignment. And I'll just kind of write, this is called Galbraith, but I'll probably just capture these. This is the Galbraith star model. I quite often just start looking at strategy before we even get anything else. There's a kind of couple of things that I can maybe briefly mention here. People have seen the, oh, wrong one. No. People familiar with the Simon Sinek model, Golden Circle? Start with why. So if you look for Simon Sinek or Golden Circle, he's got a great TED talk. And when he says that we have why in the middle, and then we have how, and then we have what. And this thing in the middle is the most important bit. Doing this live is dangerous. Right, so we need to start with why, and then work our way out. If we start with what, this is just kind of copying stuff. This is cargo cult. We need to understand why we're doing stuff in order to figure out how we're going to do it, and then we decide on what. So Simon Sinek's talking about this in terms of companies like Apple. You know, he argues Apple have a really strong why, they want to disrupt technologies, they're all about the user. And then what they do is, well, they started off with computers, and then they got into mobile phones and iPhone, and then iPods, and rumour has it they're going to be getting into watches and TVs and all that kind of stuff. That's all what, but they have a very clear why. Companies that come in and just kind of start copying what Apple try to do, they're copying the what, usually they're not so successful. So that's a kind of nice model. Always start with why. Make sure you understand why you're doing stuff. And then the other model that we use in Rally is the idea of true north. This comes from a book called Getting the Right Things Done by Pascal Dennis. True north, again, is basically your why. The true north is the thing that sets your direction and you make decisions by. So with Rally, we always have a true north. We reset our true north every year. And then we have rocks. Are you familiar with the concept of rocks, the metaphor of rocks? The idea that if you've got some rocks and some sand, and you want to get the rocks and the sand into a jar, if you put the sand in first, and then try and put the rocks won't fit. But if you put the rocks in first and pull the sand in afterwards, it will fit. So we need to focus on our rocks first. We've got all this stuff we need to do. If we want to get everything done, we need to focus on our rocks, and then we can fit all the other stuff around it. So starting with why, make sure you understand what your why is, setting your true north, using that to set your alignment, and then we can kind of start looking at all this other stuff. The thing then that leads on from strategy that I find is the idea of empathy. Empathy is a kind of an idea I picked up from design thinking, and it's a kind of very, very big bit of design thinking. And if we're just putting a process in place, we might just end up building crap. We want to build stuff that's aligned with our strategy if we're going to really improve, if we really want to have an impact. Dave talked a lot about impact this morning, and that's a kind of notion I use a lot. We want to have an impact on our customers, we need to have empathy with them. We need to understand their problem. I'm kind of interested in the stuff Dave's talking around distributed ethnography as a way of getting empathy. I want to learn more about that. But essentially the way design thinking people talk about it is going off and seeing users, working with users, spending time with your users, really understanding what they're going through in order to solve their problems. So the design thinking model has empathy at the top. And this is another one of those loops. And I suspect Dave would argue that it's another linear loop, but let's not get worried about that. So we have empathy. Given that we have empathy, we then can kind of start defining the solution or defining the problem a little bit more. Once we have that, we can start ideating, coming up with ideas. And I think the key thing here, from a complexity point of view, is we come up with lots of ideas, lots of different ideas. Then we can start prototyping those ideas. And then we test them. And this is just a loop. We kind of go back and we test those ideas on our customers, go through that empathy process again. We can probably apply this to our processes as well as to our products. We have empathy with the people in the business and the pain that they're having with our business processes and the way we develop stuff. And then let's use that to define some solutions, maybe ideate, prototype, test, and kind of go through that. So it's another kind of really useful loop. Again, I think it's kind of really important. I do think having kind of the idea of multiple experiments is a really powerful one, and the idea of contradictory experiments, ideas that actually we know that both experiments can't succeed. One of them is going to be more successful than the other one. There's a really good video from IDEO. So IDEO kind of one of the original design thinking shops, and it was it's from something like ABC, an American TV program, and they went in and they kind of followed how they would design a new shopping trolley, and they came up with about 3 different designs, and then they looked at the best and worst of those designs, and then they took the best bits and came up with a final design. Kind of a design thinking process. Quite often I'll do that when I'm working with teams to come up with their board design. Break them into different groups. Each group comes up with its own independent design. Then we start saying, well, let's share these designs with each other. Which bits do we like from other people's designs? Which bits do we not like from other people's designs? And let's try and take the best bits from all of them and kind of get rid of the bits we don't like. And then people are involved in designing their own Kanban systems. So empathy. Have empathy both with your customers and maybe with the other people in your organisation that are working with your process. And then the last bit, that kind of leads on to the idea of demand. Understanding the demand that our customers are placing on the system. Again, so this is kind of where I'm going to steal a couple of things from Stephen Parry. He has this great little matrix that he uses. And he kind of uses this to look at how are we measuring. When we're measuring how well we're doing, let's look at the measures we're using and we kind of put them on a little scale. So, going to be some that actually the customer really doesn't care about. And then we've got functional and end-to-end. So measures that are really just looking at how we work as an organisation and measuring how busy we are, how well we're doing as a department, as a group within the organisation. And then measures that are actually end-to-end from a customer's perspective, that measure the work we do from the point that they kind of start interacting with us to the point at which we've solved their problem. So where do you want most of your measures to be there?
Right.
Yes. Yeah. So really you want your measures to be top right there. Where do you imagine most measures actually are?
Bottom there.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Pay you later. Yeah. You end up with a lot of stuff down there. But this is kind of quite an enlightening process for some people to go through because they suddenly think, and this kind of ties back to the way we measure and reward people. If this is how you're rewarding people and how you're measuring people's behaviour, this is how they're going to behave. They're going to behave in a way that isn't end-to-end and doesn't really matter to the customer. You can also put actually work on here, and David Joyce has done this, I've not tried this. He actually kind of took items of work from a portfolio. He said, these things that we're doing, these things that we're working on, which are ones are just kind of to do with the way we work functionally, and that actually the customers don't care about, and which ones are really customer-focused pieces of work that help them with their end-to-end solutions. Another way of looking at it. That kind of gives us an understanding then of, are we doing the right thing, and where should we improve on. So that gives the idea of this demand profile that Stephen Parry talks about. So he calls it the core demand profile, because he says there are 4 basic kind of buckets of things that we can put work into. And I kind of realised that he kind of does this as a sense-making activity as well, because he kind of introduces the profile last. He goes out and does investigations and finds out the different types of work and how people think about the work, and then in the end he kind of goes, well, which buckets would you put all this stuff in? And it turns out that there's stuff where we create new value. We actually generally create new value for our customers. We're doing things that they really want us to do, and we're really solving that problem. But they come to us, we say, yes, we can do that, we solve that problem, we've created value. There are kind of things we get asked to do which we can't currently do, or we don't currently do. They're things where we have an opportunity to create value in the future. And in most organisations, this stuff gets lost, because a customer will come to us and say, oh, can I have this feature? Can I do this with your software? And you kind of go, no, we don't do that, and it gets thrown away. That's an opportunity to either add a feature, or maybe to go into kind of completely different business areas to really innovate. This is kind of where we can really start innovating. It's kind of useful to really start understanding this. And then there's stuff which is remedial. Ooh, I think I spelled remedial on there. No, I can't remember. How do I spell remedial? You know what I mean. Customers come to us and they say, I had this thing that was working and it's not working anymore. Can you restore that value? So that's the other. R sometimes comes for restore as well. We're restoring value that was there, that isn't there in the future, that isn't there now. And then there's external demand, which is basically work that we're doing, which we'd rather not do, but is caused by somebody else. So caused by a third party. So something else is broken outside of our software, but we're having to fix it. These top 2 are things that these are really value adding. So if you're going to get down to the kind of notion of value demand and failure demand, these top 2 are valuable. Particularly that one, that's kind of creating immediate value now. We want to get really, really good at that, delivering that value to our customers really, really quickly. Opportunity value is something that probably we want to start identifying, because this is where the real innovation can happen. And then this is failure demand. This is kind of things like, defects is the classic example there. Fixing defects is remedial demand. We're restoring value that was there. External demand, again, is something that I think is really useful to identify that we can't always, but let's say we're writing an application that interfaces with Twitter, and Twitter API is a bit ropey, and we're having to fix our software. That's kind of external demand. Then we can kind of rethink, how can we do that? How can we change the way we work with Twitter so that we're not having to this demand? So the less of this failure demand we do, the more value demand. Really kind of going through and doing some detailed analysis and getting data on the different types of demand is going to help you improve. This is all kind of, to me, this is a key part of then knowing where we are now. Because there's no point, if we have, and a lot of organisations have, a really high percentage of remedial demand, there's no point in optimising that. No point in trying to improve that. We should just get rid of it. If there's opportunity demand there, we're not even aware of it, then let's try and find out more about this, because we can do something with that. And then really we want to be spending more time creating demand. This is all about getting data. Getting some data about the way we're currently performing, the type of work that we're doing. There's no point in fixing work that isn't really causing any problems. Making sure that we're measuring the right thing. Because that's the kind of foundation, I think, that we need to be improving from. And as Dave said this morning, it's kind of about exploring that evolutionary potential. Rather than just saying, this is the problem that I think we need to fix. I'm going to jump in with a solution and start improving that bit. Starting with getting a good understanding of now, based on our customers, based on the demand that our customers are giving us, based on making sure we're measuring the right thing. Who is our customer? What problems are our customers having? What problem is our business having? How do we know that? And getting data itself is kind of the start of the conversation usually, I find. Is Benjamin in the room? I'll try not to steal his thunder, unless he's talking against me. The little model that he talks about is the Algerius ladder inference. And the idea that, I'll draw this one out as well. You kind of got this ladder, and at the bottom you basically have your observations of the world, and at the top you have the actions that you're taking, and there's lots of steps in between. So we have action, and then we have beliefs underneath it. Conclusions. Meaning, then data, and then observations. So what Algerius says was this, is we're really good at just diving straight into action. But what we should do is kind of climb down the ladder and start with actually observing what's really going on. Starting with where we are now, making sure we know where we are now, getting some data about where we are now, so that we know whether we have a Marilyn Monroe or an Albert Einstein. Because you've got two different types of data there, so we need to understand that data. Because you're looking at that data, your eye's taking those images and you're generating some meaning from that. And you've got two different sorts of meaning. So we need to make sure we're all looking at the same data, and we can start talking about how we do have the same meaning. From that meaning we draw conclusions. From those conclusions we kind of have our own sets of beliefs, and then from those beliefs we jump into actions. We had a lot of conflict because people kind of dive into different actions because actually they're looking at different data. Or maybe they're looking at the same data but they're generating different meaning from it. Or maybe they're kind of same meaning but different conclusions. But you could be anywhere on this. For me, starting where you are now, that first principle is getting down to the bottom of this ladder and making sure we're making really good, solid observations and we're capturing good data. It's all about capturing data. And we capture data to get knowledge. So there's a Deming quote. I can't remember the exact quote now. Deming's always talking about knowledge. You know, you can't get enough knowledge. We have to have knowledge. So to get knowledge, to get data, that's where to start, where you are. It's kind of all I had to say, really. I just kind of wanted to throw some ideas out there. It's kind of where my head is at the moment, and really kind of take questions now. Oh, somebody must have some questions. Chris.
So you've got this idea of meaning coming from the data.
Yeah.
But how do you ensure that you're actually getting the right data in the first place? It's not the data you collect going to be kind of directed by intent.
So part of it, I find this model useful to kind of make sure we're collecting the right, getting the same data. Because yeah, if we're getting data down here, that's not going to help. So this is a kind of a good model to make sure we're getting data that's based on end-to-end customer purpose. So that's kind of the first model. Sometimes just gathering data in itself is that first step. So it's, the data is usually always there, I think. It might not be easily accessible, and we might not really get a huge amount of it, but some data is better than no data. Kind of Don Reines talks about this when we start talking about how to calculate cost of delay. Well, let's guess first, because a guess is better than nothing. So once you have some data, you can then start kind of talking about that and kind of go, well, this is the data I'm looking at, this is what I think is going on. If somebody else agrees with that, great, you've now kind of got a basis to kind of work together. If somebody disagrees with it, there's a reasonable chance they're going to go away and get their own data. And now you've got data that you can start comparing about and you can have that conversation. Mike?
Not really a question, but I'm wondering about going back to the STAR model, looking at different methods that we're familiar with, you know, address different parts of that. And that's where the weaknesses are in what we typically do in IT.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have an answer to it.
So what was the, can you say the comment again?
You mentioned that we, in Kanban, we tend to focus particularly on the process. We do mention other things as well. I'm just wondering whether you know, the different methods that we do apply have different things to say about different points on that star.
Yeah, I think so. So. What I find interesting about this model is that it's a model to understand different types of organisational design, where none is right and none of them are wrong. You know, it's all about, you know, depending on what your strategy is, it's going to kind of probably lead to different designs, and this is just a different way of thinking about it. I guess what I find useful is throwing up there. So Kanban isn't just about the process, but it's very easy to kind of get sucked into that, I think. This helps for me when I'm kind of working with people, kind of raise those questions around, well, what people do we have? Do we have highly specialised skills? Do we have kind of really kind of T-shaped resources? And how does that map onto our structure? Because usually if you have a kind of a highly specialised skills, you've probably got a highly functional organisational structure. Now, again, that might be where you are now versus where you might think you want to be. But there's no point in designing a process that's dependent on a cross-functional team if you've got highly specialised people. And then that can maybe inform HR policies around maybe we want to be hiring different sorts of people. Yeah.
One of the troubles I see on a day-to-day basis with that model, and I'm just in the model problem I have due to this model, is that we're in control of so little of it, because we do tend to be focused on the software development teams or small teams. So we can really focus on the process and the people. We can get the people where we need to be, change the process involvement. But things like rewards. What we're going to do are 6-monthly reviews of targets, and we're going to give extrinsic rewards, which are going to completely break your intrinsic motivation. The strategy is defined by what the head of the company went and told the stock market already, based on no estimates given by anybody who knew anything about it. And the structure is defined by the very senior management. So I guess that probably does lead us to focus on the process part and the people part more than anything else. Because that's the bit we can actually directly influence easiest.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's an answer to that, other than trying to get everyone on the same journey.
Yeah, I think we use Kanban to kind of raise some visibility of some of this stuff.
And you can always ask the question, how well does the work that we're doing align to what the company needs to achieve? And you know, I've been in a situation where limiting work in progress actually meant killing every project that didn't align to what the core priorities were, you know, to a top 3 or 5 number of projects. And that was you know, the big axe coming down, limiting work in progress, and very effective it was too.
That's exactly what Google were doing all the time, aren't they? Google were cutting everything they're doing just to do that, because they realised it was done too much.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
they realised doing it for good reason.
Yeah, so using it to ask questions around, you know, the 2x2 matrix for measures. Just having getting some people in the room and like, well, what are we measuring, and how would we put those measures? I want to try and use that as a kind of a sense-making thing, where I just kind of get exemplar points in the corners. And actually, I want to talk to Dave around using his Kanban shape, but for other 2x2 matrices where you put exemplars in the corners. And I'm kind of curious as to how you might blow up against that idea.
It's not a 2x2 matrix.
Yeah, because there's always that thing about once you have 2x2 matrix, all you're doing is filling in the holes. That's probably another conversation. Right, there's another question for that.
That's probably more of a point than a question, really. And I think I'm really interested in change management and organisational models. I'm a fan of Kanban. I'll say that first before I say the next bit. Kanban, coming from a manufacturing background, and there being quite an emphasis still about its like process in manufacturing. We have a real problem in our organisation where our organisational metaphor has become very much we're a machine. How do we put the highest octane fuel in? There's pictures of engines that have gone up into business areas, and we need to find a way of emphasising the non-mechanistic elements of the way we do things, as opposed to saying, look, this is great, it comes from industry, because obviously there are things that are very different from an industrial manufacturing process to what we actually do. Just a general point.
Yeah, and I think that's why, I think, again, it's kind of why I like this model, because it does put that emphasis, which I think we are generally trying to do with organisation, with Kanban, is it's more about change management and organisational change. And this, coming across this model, or being introduced to this model, suddenly made me realise that there's a huge body of knowledge out there that we probably haven't even started to tap around organisational design and organisational change. And this is kind of one that I came across it because we used it internally at Raleigh. and myself and kind of some colleagues, kind of the light bulb started going. It's like, oh, hang on, I can see how all this other stuff we do fits into all these other bits of this model, and we can start using this. We actually did an exercise where we tried describing Kanban approaches in terms of this model and Scrum approaches. Not that it's either or, it's not good down that road. But this Scrum, I think, has assumes a certain structure, assumes certain rewards, assumes certain people. There's we kind of create this little path, potentially a narrower path, and it's probably a very good path, but it's a narrower path, and Kanban's a slightly wider path, maybe. Yeah.
I was wondering about any thoughts you have on the who, the where, and the when for this sort of thing. There's lots of good models here, but you might have some of them looked at, say, by senior management or the troops in the trenches at the very bottom actually doing the work, and then you might often have, say, monthly or project retrospectives, or would you do this when you start a new team, or is it an annual exercise?
I do this as a kind of starting activity, working with a new group. Whether that's a team or an organisation. Obviously, the higher up the organisation I can get, the better. But sometimes you have to kind of recognise the span of control you currently have. But I almost kind of throw this up again, just kind of go, we're not just trying to do process stuff here. Again, there are times when kind of people will come back and say, well, the rewards are out of my control. But then we kind of go, well, let's kind of capture what type of rewards and measures you do have, put them on this matrix, and maybe you can use that to have a conversation with somewhere else.
Okay. So just on that one, like the sort of who, you just mentioned sort of like higher up the organisation. Yeah. I guess if you did that sort of exercise like the style one with senior management, they may understand big strategy. If you did that with the people at the bottom, depending on the communication in a company, they may not really know what the strategy is. And equally, you might find that the people at the very bottom perceive a different set of rewards, what they get out of their job, or be it straight money, or whether it's interesting work, or things like that, versus the managing director at the top whose rewards is market share or being the biggest player in the field and things. I mean, how would you sort of quantify things like that where you're actually going to get a sort of sliding scale of views into this sort of thing?
If there's a lack of alignment, I want to highlight it, because that lack of alignment, if you don't have this alignment, you've kind of got a real mess to start off with. So I'll kind of often be working with the team, and usually there's somebody relatively senior, one kind of a manager, that has a reasonable understanding. But even if they're kind of starting, and it does happen more frequently than I kind of like, where they kind of go, I don't know what our strategy is. Or you kind of go, what's your strategy? To make money. That's kind of like, why are you living? To breathe. Kind of money's a kind of a precondition to having a strategy, almost, and hopefully a kind of a positive benefit of having a good strategy, but the strategy itself is not to make money. And then you're into kind of 5 whys type conversations around, how are you going to make money, or but you're kind of really trying to highlight any lack of alignment, because that's what we're trying to do, just get that alignment.
I think if you have an open organisation, it'd be quite a good exercise to deliberately bring together some representatives of the people who set the direction and the people who do the work.
Depending on the size of group, if I've got a big enough group with a big enough mix of people, I will put them into homogenous groups, so groups that are not kind of, I'll put all the managers together and all the developers together and all the BAs together, something like that, and I'll get them to come up with their own version of what they think the strategy is, and then we'll share it out, and then everybody kind of go, oh, I didn't realise that's what we were doing, or that's why we were doing it. So that's kind of one way of doing it, is actually not to mix people up, keep people that are kind of going to have the same knowledge together, and then that highlights some of the kind of the differences in opinions. And Dave's gone, but Dave has some really good kind of ideas and techniques around doing that sort of thing. I think a lot of the time, and I used to do this when I facilitated workshops, I'd mix people up. And sometimes it's better not to mix people up, because then it really shines a light on where those differences are. If you mix people up, those differences kind of get watered down a little bit. Yeah.
So, The nature of this is that you actually use this in a reductionist way. Is that the way you use it, or?
In a reductionist way?
Yeah. So.
I'm not sure I'd say reductionist, no. It's more a kind of a way of getting an awareness. Yeah, so I'm not an expert in this. This is just a model that I kind of stumbled across me that I find useful, and I find that other teams find useful just for awareness that there's more than just the process we're trying to improve, and all these things need to be in alignment. I think there's a lot more behind this that I want to learn, you know, around the different types of structure and the different kind of types of process flow, and I think we have some good ideas around what good rewards are. So general awareness, and then coming back to the alignment thing.
How similar is this to really impact mapping, do you think?
I think impact mapping probably kind of drills off your strategy, but impact mapping is more a way of impact mapping kind of ties more into kind of, I guess, the customer empathy, you know, you're doing the right thing, and the idea of impact itself, which is let's make sure we understand the impact we want to get, and that impact should be tied into our strategy. Sorry?
Isn't that the people aspect?
No, the people is more, this is more kind of HR policies.
Right.
So this is more the people within the organisation. Your strategy is probably more associated with your customers. But if you have a customer, if you have a good strategy, you should understand how to be able to articulate what business impact you want to make. And then that ties into what David was saying, you know, measure the disproportionality of impact versus, you know, the good you are at predicting outcomes. I think there's a lot of overlap there, but to me that ties into strategy. Okay, thanks very much.